A cornerstone to rural development is sustainability, and using renewable energy is a big part of that. Whether we're talking about powering an entire village or just changing the mindset of a single villager so that they're more cognizant right down to what kind of appliance they may use, whether it's a gas stove, a refrigerator, a water pump, or an entire water irrigation system, because appliances can have a huge impact on the environment. And that's why we're talking with CLASP today. Hello and welcome to 3D, the Development Design Digest, where we look at a whole of society design approach to rural development. And today we're joined by a Senior Associate of CLASP, Sumedha Avastavi. Thank you so much for joining us. First, I would like to dig into what is CLASP. It's a leading authority in efficient appliances' role in fighting climate change. But it's interesting because we don't often think of the rural poor as having access to appliances, let alone electricity. So how do you connect those dots, and what is CLASP's role in rural India?
So I would like to start by, just introducing my organization. And CLASP has been working in this sector, in this space for over 25 years across 4 continents. We work with policymakers, we work with stakeholders on ground, we work with industry players who actually manufacture these technologies. And the role CLASP plays here is that standardized products should be penetrating in the market. Whatever reaches the end consumer should be of a quality which is highly efficient, so that in turn, even if it's using a coal-based plant for utilization, at least you're saving on that energy. And we all know there's extreme temperatures all around India now. And the most vulnerable or the marginalized community is the most impacted, because me sitting here or you here sitting in Jorbag or Delhi, we can afford an AC and an air conditioner in winters when the heat waves are happening, right? But when you go in the rural areas, in the villages, a simple ceiling fan is difficult to afford. And there are a lot of setbacks because there's power cuts and there's no backup. So there's a lot of issues, and CLASP really understands that. So we're trying to understand the on-ground challenges, bring it up to the policy level. How do you build a policy around it? In addition to bring a policy, how do you make the efficient appliance efficient in itself? And that should penetrate so that the end user has not just confidence in the technology, but also we are trying to save energy there. So those are the 2 aspects.
But I just want to go back to the premise that I think a lot of people would be surprised to think that an organization like CLASP would work in an area where maybe the incomes are low, too low to prevent a great use of appliances. Is that a misnomer? Is that an outdated viewpoint? And how much do you find that you have people that really they're at the sharp end of that appliance use, and it might be used in a sort of dirty fuel way? Is there a misnomer there?
So certainly there is, and a lot of organizations have been trying since a very long time to, build mini grids at ground so that the appliances, if they reach, and they've gone through a lot of grant programs, right? So end users have got these appliances which have been penetrating in India. But again, the question is, how do you make it sustainable? Because there's a limit the government can do in terms of giving grants or giving the whole machinery for free to the end users. So again, that's another thing which as CLASP we are trying to do. We are trying to build business models, financing instruments on ground. So we did a project on solar water pump in 3 states of India. What we did in that was that we worked with the states to actually first map out what are the financial institutes at the village level. So there are federations in Rajasthan who give out loans. There's a small help groups of women who've given out loans previously. None of them have given out loans for technologies, but as CLASP, we built this ecosystem, this model with them. We tried to explain them how this is important, how you can also get paybacks in this. And that's how we are trying to, integrate that side as well. So we are not saying, go and just the policymakers should put that upfront cost. But what we are trying to say is that the ecosystem should be developed as an end user. If he needs to buy a system, he should get financing for that. He should be able to pay it back. And that's the ecosystem we're trying to create on ground.
Okay. I think many people listening to this would be who know all about this will know the statistic, but to the layperson might be surprised to find out that appliances account for 40% of global emissions in relation to CO2 emissions. How much is that? Are you able to move that needle a bit? And is it just about making appliances clean, or are they going to be dirty no matter what? I mean, after all, you're expending energy, but can you actually make a difference by changing the appliances? And how much in rural India is there a problem with what might be called old-fashioned or outdated technology that might be called dirty energy, dirty appliances?
Yeah, so, I'll answer the first question. Of course, you can make a lot of difference. You can move the needle emission levels down and up by just the technology itself. And we do support Bureau of Energy Efficiency by building on those levels. So you bring better technology. And for that, there has to be a push at the manufacturing end. And that's not an easy push to happen. So we have to work with the stakeholders. That includes the Government of India, who try to build these mandatory policies. So I would say, I'm really excited and happy to announce that as CLAS, we've already supported the government to build more than 40 standards and labeling policies. And some of them are in mandatory states, some of them in voluntary phase. But eventually, the government wants to move all the voluntary to mandatory. So an appliance, that basically means that an appliance cannot be sold in the market without a label, which means they have to get tested, they have to meet certain standards, and only then it penetrates.
And is that likely to happen?
It is happening. So for air conditioners, for your refrigerators, for your ceiling fans, the government also has a mandate. They do market surveillances. And if they'll pick up samples and they go for testing without the manufacturer actually being aware, and it's random sampling from the market. And once the sample, if it doesn't meet the standard it has mentioned, the SNL program standards, they report it back, and it happens in the public domain. It's printed in newspapers, it's printed online. Okay. So for the manufacturer, that's not a really happy space to be.
Okay.
So they're more vigilant now. They also want their products to meet certain standards. In fact, I would say now a lot of, when we go in the rural India, they also question us. They understand the SNL ban. They say that, there's stars on the appliances we see.
Okay.
And why don't we have the stars on solar water pumps yet?
Interesting.
So that is also something we're trying to now work with, working on technologies like solar water pump, like micro cold chain systems, we are seeing certain penetration now happening at the rural level. So we are tapping into those technologies. And as CLAS, we're trying to map from the, on ground. When we go to the field, we try to understand what are these technologies which will come up in the future. How do we support that? So induction stove being one of them. We see now that electric cooking is being picked up and is being really pushed by the Government of India. And we've done a lot of programs around that. And currently, in fact, as I speak, we have a program called Global Leap Awards for induction stoves. And in that program, manufacturers are nominating their products, and we give the product to end users. They will utilize that stove for 6 months, and we do energy monitoring and usability testing.
Okay.
So we'll get feedback from the user. Please tell us this week, what did you feel? What did you cook on your stove? Mm-hmm. What was the problem? So some would say, deep frying was an issue, chapati was an issue. And that's the kind of intervention we have, that when we take this knowledge back to the manufacturer, that, these are what the real users telling you, and you should improve the products. Only then there'll be penetration in the market.
Interesting. So you're doing a lot of that sort of data research that you're helping sort of connect those dots between the user and the manufacturers who might not have any idea. And I suppose, does that also some of the feedback change region to region? Like, are there different, or state to state, district to district?
It does change, but I would say it's funny because this program's in India and Africa, where feedbacks has been the same between two continents, and that's saying a lot, right?
That's interesting.
So it's been as basic as, the user, she's like, I'm illiterate. I cannot read what you've written on the buttons of the stove. I need a diagram with it for me to understand this is deep frying or this is steaming. So just that basic small things. And then like one of the manufacturers has 2 stoves. in one appliance, right? So they're really happy with that I can do dual cooking, and that kind of I can move from my LPG cooking and directly to this because I get 2 stoves versus just one stove. So
Yeah.
these are some of the learnings which even the manufacturers don't know because they've not really tested with the end user who are women in this sector, right? And maximum cooking at that level is happening by women who are now saving time. And if you talk about biomass cooking, they've spent so much time just procuring the biomass for the cooking every day.
Yeah.
They save substantial amount of time there.
Okay. So healthier and more efficient.
Right.
Interesting.
And you also asked that question is around diesel genset, right? The dirty fuel.
Yes.
And we've done, and we're doing it's a 2-year program that we're conducting in the northeast part of India, where we are working on agri-processing machineries. And what we did a mapping of that area, and we found that there are a lot of milling machines, there are lots of rice processing which is happening. But what happens is it's all run by diesel gensets because the grid power in Northeast is really not reliable at this point. And even if it's reliable, what happens is there's higher voltage which comes and the machine stops working because of a fluctuation in voltages. So they're scared to connect it with the main.
Yeah.
And our big, I mean, even all of us would be, the technologies are expensive that they procure. So there we're trying an intervention where we're saying we won't touch what the existing machinery they have for now. We will change just the fuel, which is the solar panels we'll add instead of the diesel gensets. And let's see, what is that change which happens. There's also problems with these machineries because, they're not used in, I would say, the urban setting.
Okay.
And so there's still a lot of companies working on developing it, refining it. But we see a lot of challenges. These machines are developed in southern part of India, where the rice is different versus the northern part.
Oh, interesting.
And when they go from the southern to the northern, the end users got it, paid the full amount, the machine's installed, the rice goes in, it's breaking.
Oh, no.
So, these are the challenges. And the vendors said, I've sold the machine now, I'm out of this picture. So these are some of the things we're trying to understand, and then we will go back to those manufacturers, try to get, R&D done at that stage.
Yeah.
And as class, we don't really get into the R&D, but we give that feedback to manufacturers for a scale up.
Okay.
And eventually this will also, the Meghalaya government, the Northeast is looking at this program. They want to understand what the learnings are so they can scale this up. As they see that for all the 7 sisters in Northeast, which is the 7 states, they have this huge potential with these technologies.
I want to talk about scaling up, but I want to go back a little bit, focusing on the end user. How much of the work that you do is simply about communication? Educating, but that's maybe too high a word. It's not as if people spreading information and trying to just get them to take on board what you say, and maybe evangelizing is a better word, I don't know. But how much of your job or class mission and role is just about communication, just about getting people to understand and be aware of this 40% figure, or how it relates to them on an individual level and how it can help improve their life too?
That's actually a really good question because communication plays a really big role within CLASP, and we have big communication teams instilled into CLASP, and every research we do, every work we do needs to come out in the public. For the knowledge we have, the data we collect, it's all open. We don't keep anything to ourselves. The 2 aspects I would say in this, one is the policy level. So I would say at the ground level, in the rural setting, if you talk about, they don't really, they have too many issues and they don't want to worry, or they don't care, I would say, about, what policy are you putting in on an appliance. But for them, just to understand the fact that this appliance uses less electricity versus this uses more, and in turn, I will save money, is what they understand.
Interesting.
So when we do messaging at the village level, at the rural level about our programs, it's mostly around, technology, what that can do for their livelihoods.
Okay.
And what that technology can do for them to enhance their income.
Okay.
And how that can support in their day-to-day lives. So again, this solar water pump example, we did a monitoring evaluation right after the program ended. We hired a third party. We were doing a focus group discussion. And for us, we thought, okay, you've given a pump, so you've changed the fossil fuel. Now you're using a cleaner source. There's you have water, or you don't need to wait for the electricity. So reliable source, energy security. These are the things which come to your mind. But when we went on ground, the things they were telling us, and these are all women beneficiaries we worked in. She's like, I used to get up at 2 a.m. to switch on my electric pump because that's when the electricity would come. Now I don't get up. Now I can get up at 6 a.m. easily, make my breakfast. I know the sun comes out at 7. I can go on the field, switch on my pump. I'm getting 12 hours of sleep. And that's what something which is, she's so happy about.
Yeah.
There's a security issue for women in that area because all the men have, gone to the cities to work and women are looking at the farmers. So there's a lot of security issue at midnight when you're going. One of the ladies there, she went and she got electrocuted. So these are like the basic things you don't even think about when you design these programs, but that's the feedback you get. So other than the, the basic things, you're doing so much more. And again, I would say for designing each of these programs, we sit with the group, we understand the problems, even designing the financial aspects of it. It's very important that when these women take loans, they're able to only repay them when they have harvest. And it should not happen that they're repaying these loans at the time of, when they need money for buying the seeds.
And you wouldn't have known that if you hadn't actually sat down and asked some questions. And also, it seems like you're sort of applying some basic psychology too. I love it because what you were saying was, well, I have to find out what they need. If I'm going to communicate this message to them, I have to find out what's their number one need. It might not be about making the world a better, cleaner place. It might be about getting sleep or saving money or getting more efficient use out of my stove and cooking more in one time. So you're going to them, finding out what they need, and then targeting your message to that. So this sounds very much like a design approach. So tell me how much design is a part of CLASP and how much is it just this sort of natural, organic way of doing things, or do you guys deliberately go, we need to take a whole, an eagle eye view and a design approach to try and connect all these very disparate dots? Tell me.
I would say, even when you think about the design approach, it was not really integrated in the Indian system, and it's come from the Western side. And thankfully, with CLASP, we have offices in the US and Europe, and we've learned from those offices how these programs can, you look at it at the eagle eye, you see what is the need, what is the requirement, you get down at the ground level. And also there has to be an approach where the learnings from ground go back up at the policy level to a point. And design approach is very important in those aspects. So you ideate, you plan.
It's not one way.
It's not one way.
It's circular, circles upon circles. But
right.
Yeah.
And it has to go back up. And what we found before we were just working with Bureau of Energy Efficiency, we weren't on the ground. We realized that, okay, we have understanding of the policy, we do market assessment, but what is happening? Is the penetration really happening? At the state levels, are these appliances even being sold? Are they even available in the market? And if they're available, are they really following the labeling program? So I would say, just understanding the design approach was the first thing for the India office. Learning through it and then actually using it has been really impactful and important. Also now, like Bureau of Energy Efficiency, they understand that CLASP is on ground as well. They're in the States. So they use that strategy. They invite us to meetings for us to share the knowledge from the ground upwards. And that gets built up in policies as well. Similarly, there's state level programs and there's a lot of penetration and money at the state level for rural development. We're trying to tap into that. We're trying to get meetings with the state level officials. We're trying to just get all the learnings from these pilot projects, take it up to the state level so that they can build it to a policy, because we can't be on ground. We can't, we can do 10 pumps, we can do 50, but the penetration has to happen at the government level.
That's where you scale up.
Yes.
And well, how effective is that? Is that like an uphill battle? It sounds like you guys are making a lot of progress on that.
Yeah. So, one of the programs that we are doing is around cold chain. And it's a micro cold chain 5 metric ton system. The government already had a program around that, but what we realized was that the technology has been deployed, but the end user does not know how to use the technology.
Okay.
So that's when class comes, and that's when the communication part comes in.
Right.
We are going on ground, helping them build the business models, how they can use that technology, how can they create the market linkages. And on ground, we have civil society organizations which have been existing for like over 20 years in each state, right?
Okay.
We take their support because they understand the state, they understand understanding. Yes, we partner with them, and they help us, understand the geography. They help us meet the right people, because market linkages and all that to happen, you have to be a local. No one would trust you from outside, right? And again, so we have a small team, and we can't be at the state all the time. So these are the civil society organization we try to support. We also help the society, the organization itself, build their capacity. So we do organization development trainings for them. We did, okay, you've been in the sector for 30 years, but they've not really looked back on what their vision was. It's remained the same since 30 years, even though the world has changed. So we're trying to support them as well, who can actually be our arms and hands on ground, who do the real implementation. And then as class, we don't really have to open million offices in each states, and it's diverse geographies, but you had existing institutions, you utilize those and then do the implementation there.
And that's a similar application, I suppose, to your solar water pumps.
Yes.
In Rajasthan and West Bengal
And Chhattisgarh.
and Chhattisgarh. Now, but you found something very interesting. You touched on it earlier, but I want to come back to this need for financing. And you found that what was happening wasn't exactly working the way it should, and you had to kind of did you burn the bridge and create a new model, or burn the ships, as they say? Did you have to dismantle what was there and recreate? Talk me through that learning.
So I would say, we realize that the institutions exist. So there's a technology provider who's been giving farms. That person exists. There's a financial institute who's been there at the rural level. In the case of Rajasthan, it was a federation. In the case of West Bengal, it was a bank. And so in Chhattisgarh, it was the government body itself that we worked with. So we realized these players exist. We just have to connect them at the right manner. And we have to make the right, loan document or model, so that these farmers or end users can actually take it, and it affects, and they can utilize it, and it's not the standardized way. So we sat with the community, we tried to understand what is worked in the past, what's not working, and build a model around that. And I'm really proud to say that even though there's a Kusum scheme in India where almost 80% of the pumps are subsidized, people still took pumps with their own money by taking loans from these federation and banks. They took the loans, the pump was installed, and they're repaying the loans back as well.
Great.
So there we came up with a strategy called end-use incentives. We said that, okay, we are not giving you upfront cost. If you do certain things, we try to nudge their behavior, which was judicious use of water. So it's not like you have a pump, so you'll keep pumping out water. You have to use it judiciously. You'll do organic farming, because we realize there's a lot of fertilizers being used. There's a lot of pesticides being used, which again leads to CO2 emissions and other factors, right? So we kind of specified that, and there was around cropping patterns, diversification of crops. The farmers in Chhattisgarh were just doing paddy, and that's what they've done always. We said, why don't you diversify the crops? Why don't you do vegetable? Which is also that if the paddy fails, you have a second crop and an income, so you pay back that loan. So we were trying that, this should work, and how that income should increase for the farmer. And it's interesting because there we introduced a micro drip irrigation system, and the farmers for the first time grew vegetables. And they were surprised. They realized just with one thing we could get.
And I love this, because this is so far away from what you think of as an appliance authority. This is like, again, you're taking the whole design approach and saying, if we want to get our mission done, we have to do all these, pull all these other levers to just to get our mission. And as a result, you're helping in so many other ways, which is fabulous. So they grew vegetables, and are they still?
Yeah, they're still growing, because they have that drip irrigation system, and they've understood how it works, and they've understood that now this vegetables, they're selling it in the market themselves. So they don't even have to go, they don't have to find an end user. They're saying we'll go in the market and we'll sell it ourselves.
Well, almost as it just, we planned this so well, because my next question was about sustainable agricultural processes. So are there any other examples? That sounds like one that you've helped. Are there any others that you and your team have been able to sort of bring in?
Yeah, so I would say, like, we've encouraged a lot of row farming, and those are just things which have existed for a very long time in traditional farming practices, but farmers have also moved away from it. Then there's resilient seeds. So they use less water, and the government of India has really worked hard to get these seeds out. They're available, but farmers are scared, what if it fails if we plant them? So we have civil society organizations. They did demonstrations with them where they've seen, okay, they see it in their own facility, and that's been sown and showed to them. It took them 6 months to understand, okay, it works, we can buy these seeds. And these seeds are using less water. They're drought resistant. So that's another thing which really helps. The other thing what we were telling the farmers was that to stop soil erosion, you should also start planting some trees around your, the farm area. And that has always been traditionally done in the southern part of India.
Okay.
But the farmers we were working were not doing something like this. And again, this is something they learned and they're trying to do it. So I would say, it takes time for these changes to be implemented on ground, but small things like making the seeds available, giving them this training that, you can try this also. And why don't start with the full land? Try it on a patch of land, see if it works. And then you don't have to do anything. If it works, they will pick it up.
But again, I'm marveling, because this feels so far away from appliances and how to have more energy efficient appliances to fight climate change. This is complete. This is almost like, is it a CSR wing of CLASP? I mean, how is it that you seem to branch so far out? Is it just as I postulated earlier? It's just this helps get your mission through, even if it means you have to spread your wings wide?
So if we just go on ground and tell them, this is a pump, why don't you buy it? They will buy it, but then, they'll say that, okay, for why shall I buy it from you? Why don't I get it from the government program? Or, what is it, that extra thing that will I get, or what's that extra benefit I get from the pump? So we had to understand on ground that whole full ecosystem. And then, okay, I'll buy the pump, but where's the money? Are you giving me the money? Right? So those are the questions you get asked on ground, and then you're just like, appalled, and it's a setback, right? You're like, how will I get this out in the market? And how do you kind of test these technologies other than giving out for free? So a really important aspect for us is scale up, right? So working with the government, working with the policymakers to get the programs up and running as a scale up level. And that has been a strategy within CLASP. So to get to that level, we have to move into this direction where with appliance efficiency, you're looking at other aspects which complement the technology that exists.
Interesting. Wonderful. That's fabulous. And I want to, before the sun comes and completely wrecks our shot here, I want to talk about, does CLASP get involved in any off-grid solutions? Because there are still so many rural Indians who are not electrified. Fewer than before, but nonetheless, they do exist. Is that any area that you work in?
So we don't really, in the African market, yes, we promote off-grid products. But if I talk about the Indian market right now, when we've done a lot of research and these programs on ground, the Indian rural sector is such that now they want to get connected to the grid.
Okay.
And in most places, they are connected. Yes, grid could be unreliable source, but then going for a completely off-grid system. And the concept of off-grid, I would say now is, it's just, for example, a solar lantern, which is like a light you use at night, but that's just a secondary thing, which is an emergency light at home. But they would still want to get connected. That's the mindset now. They don't want off-grid appliances. They want appliances which also, it could be hybrid. They're okay for hybrid, but not off-grid.
Okay, interesting. Before we end, I want to know a little bit about your journey, and also as somebody who sounds like you're in the field a lot, I'd like to know, how often are you in the field, and what are the stories that you've seen and heard with your own eyes and ears that have really stuck with you?
So how often I'm on the field, I would say I've not really counted that, but almost every month, at least a week or more.
Fabulous.
And that is very important.
I was going to say, is that why you got into this area?
Yes. So I'm really passionate about, working at the ground level, learning and seeing what the real issues are. When I was in university, I used to attend these conferences and I used to realize that, okay, we're speaking big things in a 5-star room, but what's really happening on ground is something I saw that gap.
Yeah.
Working in the sector, I saw that gap. And I did a lot of internship with NGOs where they would just take us on ground and we would have focus group discussions. And the learnings you got from the discussion, you can never have those learnings, I would say, from research papers or, sitting on Google.
Yeah.
So that just kind of helped me get into the sector and I was passionate about it. But at the same time, I didn't just want to be there. I wanted this to have an impact. So help build policies as well. So in that sense, I would say class really helps in that aspect, that whatever you learn on ground, you take it up there. You kind of try to convince the policymakers. You think about a scale-up program. You don't just stick at the pilot stage. So that drove me to work further, and I did my master's in environmental science. That also helps me understand these on-ground issues, because there's a lot of social and economical challenges. And being on ground, even though I don't have a financing degree, but now I've learned how to create business models, working with the stakeholders. And I would say this is something I learned from them, right? From the institutions which have been on ground, rather than just, personal learning from a degree or a book.
Yeah.
So that really drove me.
And the story that sticks with you?
So the story that stuck to me was, again, like I mentioned, the women we work with, the solar water pumps, just basic that you go on ground thinking that this technology will bring, 1, 2, 3 benefits. But when you hear from them, the benefits totally are different. Like they're getting sleep at night. It's easier for them now. They're able to cook for their children, spend more time with their children because the cooking time has significantly decreased using induction stove. So things like that, like, you learn from the field, I would say, and it's a give and take relationship when you work at the rural level. So that I feel I'm really passionate about that and want to continue in that space.
Do you keep in touch with any of these women?
Yeah. So in fact, they have my number and I've created WhatsApp groups.
Oh, fabulous.
With different geographies. So Rajasthan has one group, Chhattisgarh has another. So we keep in touch. That also helps us because we invite them to programs in Delhi.
Oh, wonderful. That must be exciting for them.
Yeah, so they get like a space to talk about what were the programs, what are the impacts. And even the civil society organizations, they don't get a platform to speak actually. So we realize that, and whenever we have meetings in Delhi, conferences in Delhi, we invite them as one of the panelists. So they can talk what the ground reality is. And in the panel, we also have policymakers. So, they can hear right from the ground what is happening.
Well, we should get together on that off screen. We can get together and talk about that, because I love hearing these stories and giving a platform, because they're not often heard. So,
and you should come with us to see our programs as well.
Be careful what you offer. I might accept. Oh, Sumedha, thank you so much for all of this information, for all your insights, and what a journey you're on. And you're only at the beginning. So, so thank you so much. And thank you very much for watching to the end. We appreciate it. And we hope that you will stay tuned for more 3D. Please, if you like this, hit the little like button and also share it so that other people can get these insights. Thank you so much.